Hello, everyone. My name is Anne Good. I'm the Assistant Curator of the James Ford Bell Library. On behalf of the First Fridays Committee and the Archives and Special Collections Department, welcome to First Fridays. It's the final event of the year, a year in which we've followed the theme, Matters of the Heart. And I would like to pass the podium over to Chris Kiesling for a moment.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I think we might need to get a bigger room. Getting a little crowded in here. This is awesome. As Anne said, I'm Chris Kiesling. I'm the Director of Archives and Special Collections. And as this is the final First Fridays for the academic year, I'd like to say a few words of acknowledgement for the people who make this happen. So the First Fridays Committee, which does all the catering, does the programming, they also do some of the presentations. Linnea, Kate, Amanda, Anne, Aidan, and Alex, thank you very much for putting together another wonderful year of programming. And to Alan and his colleagues at Middle English for ASL interpretation. We appreciate that. To Andy, who does all the setup and takedown every month when we do this. To Monica and Toby, and today Cody, for all of our tech support. We're very, very grateful. And of course, thank you to all of the presenters who give us such enlightening and interesting programs. I learn something every time we come to First Fridays, so that's always great. This morning, with the help of Tim Johnson's long memory and Eric Moore's sleuthing abilities, we determined that the First Fridays were in the spring of 2001. So next year will be our 25th anniversary, and we should probably do something special for that. So stay tuned. We hope to see you again in the fall, and thanks for coming.
So today's presentations will also be posted later on the University of Minnesota Library's YouTube channel. As you probably all know, First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Anderson and Mrs. Eleanor Anderson in honor of the former library director, Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations are based on materials in the various units of the university library's archives and special collections. Chris already said this, but again, a special thank you to the interpreters from Middle English who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentations. If time allows, we'll have at the end a Q&A session after both presentations. For the Zoom audience, please submit your questions using the Q&A function rather than the chat so that we can keep track of the questions. For the in-person audience, please hold your questions until the end. After the presentations, there will be a tour led by Davu. And now let's pause for the land acknowledgement. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. So now an introduction, just a brief introduction to our two presentations, which feature the Charles Babbage Institute Archives and the Gibbons Collection of African American Literature and Life. So two short blurbs to whet your appetites. So the first one is Our High-Tech Love Affairs, presented by Amanda Wick, who is the curator of the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. High tech fascinates us. Its potential and limitations inspire humans to push further, do more, and dream bigger. From the evolution of online dating to the passion for the space race and the patriotic fervor of the nuclear arms race, this presentation will examine ways in which computers fuel unexpected matters of the heart and soul. And the second presentation is Love and Belonging in Black Art and Politics. And this is presented by Davu Seru, who is the curator of the Givens Collection of African American Life and Literature. There is Black love in the archives. This presentation of materials from the Givens collection highlights how race leadership in the arts and in politics has shaped a nearly 200-year romance with Black nationalism. So Amanda, I invite you to the front.
There we go. Hi, my name is Amanda Wick, and I am the curator for the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CBI, we focus on the history of computing, the technology itself, as well as intersections between tech and culture. So here we are today to talk about matters of the heart. A theme I should mention that the entire department chooses in an open and democratic process, i.e. a Google form. And I have to say my colleagues did me dirty yet again, despite continued negotiation. It's a brief moment of silence, though, for an even worse one for me, which was the 2019-2020 First Friday's theme of animals in the archives. That one was hard. So I've added a subtitle to this talk. And it's changed here and there as I've continued to build it out. But since I first conceived it last summer for numerous reasons, at the time I thought I might present on some of the very cute ways that tech gets integrated into our lives and how we use it to find love. However, times have changed a bit and my sense of optimism along with it. So what I'd like to do today is address the ways in which we've become so entwined with technology that we are practically paralyzed without it. A love affair that's become so toxic and one-sided that we can scarcely imagine life without our handy devices, our curated algorithms, our digital spaces, and internet interconnectivity. It's a situationship, if you will. Okay, but first, a note about audience participation. That's all of you. By now, I think we are all quite aware that human beings have a fascination with things that are a tad and occasionally very, very obviously not great for us. Some might even go so far as to call it an addiction or a certain drive towards self-annihilation, but we're trying not to be too catastrophist this Friday. Anyways, the recurring theme is definitely going to be popping up throughout this talk, and I would very much appreciate participation from all of you. When this meme pops up and I say some variation of how are things or how's that working out for you, I'm going to need everyone here to respond with not great, Bob. Got it? Okay, we're going to give it a shot. Hey, First Fridays, how are things? Yes, excellent. Onward. It's going to be fun, guys. All right, creativity, the art of innovation and the ability to critically think and connect a multitude of concepts and ideas is the foundation of human nature. As Carl Jung once said, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct arising from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the object it loves. And so we build and evolve things as toys and tools that we love, or at least that we build some level of emotional connection to. We create and get lost in the creative process, sometimes not even considering the ramifications of what we create, how it might be used, and how it might evolve down the road. The name Oppenheimer might ring a bell to some of you as a perfect example. And this is where a situationship begins, with pure, unbridled optimism and the installation of a certain set of blinders to consequences. When attachment goes beyond a love or a want or a desire, it can become a need. And when you need something in your life, depending on what that something is, that situation might be starting down the path of toxicity. So I'm going to play a quick video from the archives.
Man, alone on Earth, has the capacity for abstract thought and the freedom to choose what to do or think. What he decides to do may be a subjective choice, a matter of personal preference. What he enjoys may be the result of his taste or education. But there are certain cases where there is, like it or not, no choice, where facts are facts and quite inescapable. Here, the computer is man's newest tool. In the Industrial Revolution, machines multiplied the power of his hands. Today, the computer can provide an enormous extension of his mental powers. But to use such a revolutionary tool properly, it must be understood, seen in perspective. Humans are artistic, fallible, inventive, original. Their capacities are tremendous. But in the realm of facts, where there is only one possible answer, where there is no question of judgment or opinion, and where human qualities such as imagination and foresight are not required, computers are a priceless tool.
How's that for propaganda? All right. As Tim Wu optimistically put it in an October 2020 article for The Atlantic, America has long carried on a great love affair with technological progress. But the truth is that really big inventions, the printing press, the internal combustion engine, the internet, have both upsides and downsides. They make new things possible, but they also tend to undo settled expectations and create chaos. The real question is not whether there will be major technological changes, but whether societies can learn to better handle the disruptions that follow. In 1999, Raymond Kurzweil proposed the idea of computing being unique in industrial technology advancement with its degree of exponential change rates in comparison to other advancements. He suggested that the rate of technological advances is exponential rather than linear, and that means that the technology builds on itself in a sort of positive feedback loop, allowing each generation to advance at an increasing rate. It is not surprising, perhaps, when you examine high-tech change rates that we've been seduced by innovation. Shiny object syndrome and the allure of the newest, fastest gear, messianic prophecies of efficiency and prosperity, and it's a call for the good old competitive spirit in races to the moon, the smallest and fastest chips, the best cameras. The history of computing is the American dream and the call of the universal human id, distilled down into one very, very potent love potion. But the thing about love potions, regardless of how romantically we might depict them in pop culture, the truth of the matter is that they generate feelings and ignite actions that are inherently artificial and forced. They are non-consensual. They are toxic. If you think about it, creation and innovation are tied to love and other positive emotions, and it starts in our most ancient texts and legends. Out of chaos comes something, a spark that generates the universe. Out of chaos comes that spark then is the motivating factor behind it is the same one that we use to create tools, stories, music, art, and to create is to be human, to innovate is to be human, to change is to be human. However, the how and why we innovate and create is somewhat different, and it's forged within its own sociological crucible, determined by what we emotionally, culturally, economically, and politically value. It is no surprise then that human innovation begins with basic tools to make tasks easier, which progress to machines, which progress to more and more complex machines for long-distance communication, mass production, energy generation. Computers and automation are a natural evolution in humanity's efforts to make life easier for themselves. And automation does increase efficiency and prosperity. But the cost to labor and human capital cannot be ignored. And yet it's very easy to do so since so many people are gaining wealth due to automation, and it becomes even easier every day to ignore those who are actively losing without being offered a replacement or opportunity. Years ago, automation largely meant manufacturing and clerical jobs, as you can see here. Today, it means software development, surgery, media creation. The jobs in these pictures are eliminated. These people, it's time to pivot. Obviously, this is an extraordinarily timely topic and worth a very nuanced conversation beyond what we have time for today. So we'll leave it here. And this is a great opportunity for us to practice. How's all the automation treating us today in our post-capitalist society? I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag, right? But also not 100% great. Anyway, let's talk for a bit about some really specific use cases for computers and high tech, because it's in the usage of computers that stuff really starts to get twistier and darker and more interesting. This is a later phase in our situationship, once initial innovation is complete and the rate of change and advancement and evolution is starting to accelerate. While weaponry was always an area of interest for innovators and technologists, you could think of the evolution of blacksmithing and metalworking, for example. Adding computers to the mix generates an entirely new level of lethality. Weapons of mass destruction are born. People were and still are passionate about them, in love with them, about 100% positive that they are necessarily for our survival. ICBMs, nuclear submarines, the Iron Dome, all have been hailed as necessary for both deterrence and defense, and at the time, maybe they were. As you can see here, we're talking about the heart of the weapon. The Burroughs Corporation, just one of many in the defense contracting industry, is determined to generate and condition people to feel an emotional attachment to weaponry, the fear that they're needed, and a source of national pride to build them. Oh, yikes. But you know what? Humanity is really interesting. We seek balance, or at least we develop defense mechanisms like points and counterpoints. And in the case of high-tech weaponry, defense contracting, and nuclear proliferation, it engenders the rapid growth of an entirely new genre of media, dystopian sci-fi. Think about it. So deeply did the nuclear age and application of computing to weaponry become valorized that it almost instantly generated an anti-establishment subgenre of art and media. Dr. Strangelove, the Terminator franchise, the Forbin Project are, after all, dark dystopian parodies and thrillers involving the defense of the world against nuclear or alien attacks. Some with sentient computers. Stopping there, maybe things are trending towards not so terrible. We've got the arts on our side. People care. But sorry to say, things are probably not. They are about to get insidious, so brace yourselves. First Fridays. How are we feeling? There you go. I'm so glad I did this. Okay, so the home computer. Beyond weaponry and defense, at some point, computers used to be in offices, but creators began to see new applications for them, and mass market high technology was truly born in the 1960s, where designing computers and thinking machines that could be used for everyday tasks in offices, culminating in the home, as companies rapaciously sought new markets. The appearance of a computer in a home environment in advertising, and later on in TV shows like Family Ties, marks the integration of computers into everyday life. The message is clear. No longer can we leave computers in the office or on a film or on a TV screen. Now they're in our homes, critical, integrated into our daily life. To keep up with the Joneses or the Keatons, so to speak, we each have to have our own computers. All of these periodicals demonstrate the transition between corporate business economic need to personal need. We can no longer admire computers from afar. We must have them with us always. A new phase in the situationship, because now it's personal. Okay, so computers are now and tech are in our homes. This chasm that you see was likely the Rubicon we crossed to get computers into homes. And today, even the most laggard of laggards likely has some sort of computing device to their name. A smartphone, a smart appliance, a Ring doorbell, etc. So how did we get here? We've hinted at it in some of our earlier slides, but we can immediately take a look at communication scholar Everett Rogers' Diffusion of Innovation Theory, which was first published in 1962. Despite its pre-digital origins, it does remain the most effective method for documenting the progress of innovation and penetration into the cultural ethos driving consumer behavior. The diffusion of an innovation model is represented by this bell curve, showing the stages of market adoption of a new product. According to Rogers' original theory, there are 5 attributes that impact an innovation's progress through the model. Relative advantage, is it better than what it's replacing? Compatibility, does the innovation recognizably build on what came before? Complexity, is it easy to use? Trialability, can I experiment with it? Observability, are the results of this innovation clear for all to see? The better an innovation meets these criteria, the faster its adoption. And if we recall that exponential rate of change graph that I showed earlier, we can see how computers and high tech absolutely swamp this bell curve in terms of speed. Relative advantage, check. Compatibility, check. And it happens fast. Complexity, each generation becomes easier and easier to use between simple graphic user interfaces, the integration of AI, and maybe more importantly, we cannot ignore how status, as another attribute, is fueling the widespread adoption of technology. Basically, the degree to which status and hype affect competitive advantage for technologies vying for the same market position. It's a huge reason why VHS beats Betamax, Apple's iPhone destroys Palm and BlackBerry, and Facebook crushes MySpace. So what are we doing now that we've smashed that bell curve for innovation? It's pretty easy. I mean, computers and tech are deeply integrated into daily life and facilitated by open networks, connectivity, and the sheer number of institutions requiring a device and internet access to participate. Now that they're ubiquitous, we've become okay with automation, and efficiency is the name of the game. Tech is being fine-tuned to make our lives even easier, allowing us to offload more and more tasks and activities to computers, supposedly so we can just enjoy life free of minor paperwork. But before I go further, let me also point out that this integration does not have to be toxic. In fact, these devices and the internet access improve the lives of millions, if not billions, on a daily basis. They're incredibly important and valuable tools that allow people to participate in a society in ways that they might otherwise not have. We cannot and should not forget about how important accessibility is to a well-functioning society. And tech, the very nature of it, facilitates connection and accessibility. But speaking for the general, as we begin to offload more and more tasks to computers, probably one of the most interesting evolutions is how computers facilitate and influence human-to-human interactions. So let's look at a few of those. Computer dating, there it is. It has links to computers going all the way back to 1959, when Jim Harvey and Phil Fiala created the Happy Families Planning Service as a class project at Stanford. These guys were Zuckerberg before Zuckerberg's parents were even existed. The service used a questionnaire involving topics from desirable physical attributes to views on religion and politics, and the analytical power of an IBM 650 matched 49 women to 49 men based on their answers. The 1960s and 70s showed a massive proliferation of dating services, most of which operated along the same lines of these questionnaires being fed to computers and matches being spit out. It becomes a $1 million industry almost within the first decade. And by 1980, a $1 billion industry when video dating interviews were added to the mix with questionnaires. And today we obviously have a boatload of dating apps. We've got Bumble, Match, Tinder, Grindr, Raya, Hinge, all using proprietary algorithms to match potential couples. And it's huge, huge business. A 2023 study by the Pew Research Center found that 53% of US adults aged 18 to 29 have used a dating app, compared to 37% of US adults aged 30 to 49 and 20% of adults aged 50 to 64. And honestly, I'm guessing that these numbers are higher in all reality. Because of the different evolutions of online dating, there's always been a little bit of a mixed social reception to it. I mean, there's a time where my uncle, who met his wife on Match, did not want to admit that they met at Match, so he invented this huge story. And then finally, he had a whiskey and told us the truth. Funnily enough, though, the pitfalls of online dating that so many of our friends, families, and colleagues or ourselves might have experienced or relayed or published in a bad Tinder dates subreddit are likewise not new. Here's a fun quote from a case study in the book Sex by Numbers by John Tanner, an item in our collection. It's an expose on computer dating. The element of lying often causes great problems to computer service agencies. People are reluctant to tell the facts about themselves or their backgrounds. As a result, the lie teller often meets the wrong man or woman. If we go back to the IBM video about man and computer, we can see why, yes. In this example, Lana Guilford, as we shall call her, was a victim of her own tendency to lie about herself. The big lie that Lana told was that she was a chesty girl. It brought her to the wrong people. The point here is that computers are not human. They can only work with the data that's fed to them. And people may lie or deceive consciously or unconsciously, but we are now conditioned to rely on computers to spit out answers and dates in dating case. It means that we don't necessarily question the connection the machine makes across data points to return results that are, because there is some sort of emotional satisfaction in receiving a result, receiving an answer, receiving a match. But what about community? Computer dating is what it is. But community is important. And I alluded to this earlier, but once computers became networked, even before the dawn of the internet as we currently know it, human-to-human connection and interaction were some of the first things people used them for. Online networked communities related to special interests, identity, and activism proliferated as early as the 1970s. We actually have some newsletters from a San Francisco-based cult that was very obsessed with computers and really thought they were going to save the world. It's fascinating stuff. But their interconnectivity of computing allowed diverse swaths of Americans who might never have had access to community a path towards a social network. There's so many wonderful things about the way that computers and the internet facilitate community building and engagement, making it possible. But at the same time, tech is, as we know, ethically agnostic. Just as the First Amendment allows space for an entire spectrum of opinions and positions, as well as the freedom to express them in a variety of venues, computers and the internet provide the grandest stage and the largest microphone in human history, both for good and for evil. And many of these platforms and websites have set in motion a path towards community that is a whole lot darker than the early days of forums and bulletin boards, because human interests vary across a massive spectrum, and all of them are accommodated on today's internet. So what does that mean? Honestly, it would take an even longer session to break down the speed at which hate proliferates in online spaces, sometimes organically, but often following the lead of high-tech companies who create open-ended applications and develop algorithms that are biased. They are steeped in bigotry, racism, misogyny, and homophobia, and so much more. Psychologists and sociologists who are far wiser than me have published book after book and study after study on this very topic. And we have known about this potential for years before even the internet was adopted so universally. For example, these items date from the 1980s to the present. This is pre-Al Gore's internet, people. Today, the proliferation of false content online is pervasive and exacerbates the erosion of global trust in institutions. In fact, only 40% of people say they consistently trust news, indicating that they value truth from friends, acquaintances, and community sources before mainstream media, which honestly I get, given a recent experiment I was reading about where people alternated between watching Fox News and MSNBC as news sources. Those who watched both became radicalized even faster than if they only watched one. As the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report in 2024 highlights, disinformation will be the world's top risk to the sanctity of governance and a democratic order in the next 2 years. That's 2024. We got one more year, folks. It is not something that we can afford to sleep on or be complacent about. Yikes, yikes again. So how are we feeling? That's pretty scary stuff, yeah. So what do we stand to lose, or what have we already lost because of our toxic situationship with computers? Attention spans and executive functioning levels are way down from even 20 years ago. Critical and analytical thinking skills. Colleges widely report that incoming freshmen are less likely to have the skills required to succeed in classes, even while they have the test scores and the grades. Literacy is way, way, way down. In 2017, 19% of US adults ranked at the lowest levels of literacy. In 2023, that figure increased to 28%, according to a study by the National Center for Education Statistics. In 2024, the National Literacy Institute reported that 54% of adults have a literacy level below a 6th grade level, and 20% are below 5th grade level. Take that in for a moment. Yeah, not great, Bob. We don't even need to put it up there. And all of this, though, leads to widening gaps between community circles. And while those circles become more crowded, so like I guess a good example would be if we were in a zoo You could make the analogy that our enclosure might be growing a little bit with the number of people who are joining, but its walls are becoming more rigid, fortress-like, and the gaps between our enclosures to, our distance from, say, us and the penguins, it's never been greater. Can we fix it? I regret to tell you that there is no going back to pre-smartphone days. There's no return to life before the internet. There's no Luddite idyll hiding around the corner, because tech is now a currency that we utilize in virtually every aspect of our lives. We've offloaded so many processes, workflows, and tasks to tech that disconnecting completely from computers and high tech would literally result in a person's inability to meaningfully participate in society. As my 10-year-old son would say, we're cooked. Like I said at the beginning, when I first came up with this title and conceptualized this talk, it was going to be light, it was going to be fun, computer dating, community, goofy cat memes. Now, however, there's a certain level of heaviness permeating American culture. And tech has contributed to that weight. It has doubled it, tripled it, and exponentially grown it. There's a darkness in America right now, and tech has helped trip the breaker that turned out the lights. As we come to the end of this talk, I would like to consider the experience of Mary Shelley's Dr. Frankenstein, a man who felt such need for connection and creation that he designed something that had a life and soul of his own, one that was not tethered to human experience, but one who learned and developed his own code of ethics and definition of love. And how did that work out? In the end, yes. In the end, there is only us who can break free from the chains of carefully constructed code and data that we have so painstakingly built and fooled ourselves into loving, not our creation's fault. Perhaps we can find new ways to live with the monster we've created, but for the moment, the monster is winning and laughing as we cannibalize ourselves. I wish we could end this, our last First Friday of this year, on a high note, something positive and fun. But as I trawled through the CBI archives in preparation for this task and examined where the legacies recorded down in the caverns have led to in today's world, it seems that true love stories with a happily ever after are very few and far between. Our relationship with computers and high tech is truly, at this point anyway, more tragedy than rom-com. It's bad romance, a toxic situationship. But hey, at least the high tech industry gives us cat memes. Am I right? Thank you.
Six figures. That was brilliant. I feel funny. Good morning. Good afternoon. Hello and thank you for attending. I took up, well, to restate, my name is Davu Underwood Seru. I took up the role of the curator of the esteemed Archie Given Senior Collection of African American Literature and Life just 2 years ago now. But I am returning to work that I began here as a graduate student at the U. As many of you may know, the U does not have a library sciences program anymore, right? That said, I must begin with an apologia, which one I don't feel too bad about. My expertise is literary and cultural history, right? Not library sciences. Please bear with me. The Gibbons Collection is composed of rare books and archival collections that cover over 250 years of African American cultural history. And it reminds us that African American history is American history. They are not separate. Our theme is Masters of the Heart. I first thought I would talk about the fleeting romance turned long-time platonic bond evident in the correspondences of African American poets E. Ethelbert Miller and June Jordan, but a scholar more capable than me, Dr. Tyon Coleman, recently presented on those correspondences here. The image that I selected to frame this talk is of a ticket you see here on the screen for the 6th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Concert held at Northrop Auditorium, University of Minnesota in 1987. This item is not from the Givens collection. Still, it piqued my interest, about which I'll share more. First, though, let me say thanks to my colleagues at University of Minnesota Archives for making it available at the library's digital repository, UMedia. Listed in red print on an off-white background are the guest speaker, actress Ruby Dee, and featured music ensemble, the Reginald Buckner Quartet. Dr. Reginald Buckner was an alum who became faculty in the School of Music and Department of African American and African Studies here at the university. Next to the ticket stub, we have a 1981 reprint of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Strength to Love, originally published in 1963, the year that the president was assassinated, during the civil rights struggle, that ongoing struggle to make America a true democracy. One chapter of King's book, titled Love in Action, is an exegesis on the Christian ethic of forgiveness, where the object of love is understood to be outside of oneself. Forgiveness is self-sacrifice and the starting place for individuals in a beloved community. I've come to talk about Black love. Black love may be familiar to some of us as a hashtag that supports Black Love Day, a holiday held the day before Valentine's Day, started by community organizer Ayo Handi Kindi, which might have similar ambitions to Kwanzaa, to resist full assimilation into a culture that has taught people to hate themselves. Ruby Dee, who spoke at the memorial concert, is of course the famed actress who played Ruth alongside Sidney Poitier in the stage play from '59 and film adaptation from '61 of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. Dee was also the life partner of fellow actor Ossie Davis, whom she married in 1948 and would remain married to until his death in 2005. They belonged to the generation born during the Harlem Renaissance and were company members of the American Negro Theater with Poitier and Minneapolis' own Hilda Sims, who was from the North Side. Together, Ruby and Ossie, they made the transition to film roles during the golden age of American cinema. Pictured here is an inscribed first edition of Ruby and Ossie's co-memoir, With Ossie and Ruby in This Life Together from 1998. Ruby and Ossie were the Beyonce and Jay-Z of their era. Their famous life together is evidence that there is not necessarily a binary exclusion between the individual's romantic love and the kind of beloved community that Dr. King sacrificed himself for. Moreover, Ruby Dee's presence at the 1987 memorial, supported by faculty in the African American Studies Department just 1 year after the founding of the Givens Collection, is evidence of local and national collective efforts to generate and promote Black love. Moreover, the memorial celebration makes evident the often painstaking work of an individual or community loving themselves so that it might be possible for them to love others. This year celebrates the 40th anniversary of the Archie Givens Senior Collection of African American Literature and Life. And I would extend an early invitation to all of you to a 40th anniversary exhibit, which will be here in the main gallery beginning in October as we celebrate the 40th anniversary. When you come, you'll learn that the collection came to the university libraries thanks to a coalition of forces at the university and among African American community leaders led by my teacher, John S. Wright, pictured here on the right, who is now Emeritus Professor of African American and African Studies. On the left there, you see a worker carting in the large boxes of around 2,300 books that came in 1985. The collection has now grown to over to become tens of thousands of objects that compose this great gift we have here. 1 year after its arrival, the collection was named in honor of Archie Givens Sr., a beloved businessman and community leader in Minnesota. In short, the founders in short order, the founders, working with a patron circle, which you see on the right there, composed of esteemed members of the local African American community, and their names are listed on the back wall. And you saw their pictures or their names listed along with a photograph of Professor Wright as you entered the Gibbons Conference Suite. Early on, the esteemed members of that council, again, this coalition of forces, working with the local African American community, organized a community advisory board and sought to promote the collection locally and nationally as an educational resource. They understood its value, and so they put it on the road. Okay. Recently, I gave a talk to a group of retired school principals on the Gibbons Collection's contribution to education locally and nationally. After the talk, an attendee, supportive of the collection's efforts and exasperated by the current mood of some in this country, asked with concern, when are these things no longer going to be separate? By which they meant African American studies, African American literature, and presumably Black people. In my answer, I took issue with the question and countered, they are not separate. Archives provide plenty of evidence of this. For instance, the oldest work in the Gibbons collection is the first publication of African American literature, Phillis Wheatley's Poems on Subjects Religious and Moral from 1773. This collection of neoclassical poetry was an enormous achievement for an enslaved teenager who was born in West Africa. In it, where love is concerned, the poet, writing at the dawn of the American Revolution, pens verses, and this is the title of the poem, to the Right Honorable William, Earl of Dartmouth. She makes her appeal. Should you, my lord, while you peruse my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung, whence flows these wishes for the common good, by feeling hearts alone best understood, I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Afric's fancied happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest, what sorrows labor in my parents' breast. Steeled was that soul, and by no misery moved, that from a father seized his babe beloved. Such my case, and can I then but pray others may never feel tyrannic sway. Wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung. Wheatley's power in this poem and in this collection comes in part from her knowledge of the culture that she has had to master as a slave. Classical rhetoric, English verse, and the Holy Bible. Testifying to an African's capacity to desire freedom when many claimed we lacked such a capacity was a bold move for such a vulnerable person. Of course, American patriots in love with freedom would eventually rebel against the King of England. Freedom and citizenship for Black people would be delayed. And the road to freedom, as in the case of Wheatley, has been burdened by the need to prove ourselves worthy. The scrapbook shown here is from one of our yet to be processed archival collections, the Hatcher family papers. It belonged to Raymond O. Hatcher, a contemporary of Langston Hughes, the great poet of the Harlem Renaissance. Like Hughes, Hatcher attended Lincoln University, a historically Black college founded in Pennsylvania, not during Reconstruction, but in 1854. The scrapbook gathers up instances of Hatcher's life as a student at Lincoln University during the height of the new Negro Renaissance, an era which saw large numbers of the grandchildren of enslaved Black people graduating from colleges and universities, built, though, during Reconstruction. The book, here as shown, is open to pages which include, on the left, a Valentine for my brother, and group pictures with handwritten captions on the right. A caption between a pair of group portraits reads, "Home." Sometime after college, Hatcher would leave college after having left home and move to Minneapolis, where he would lead the Phillis Wheatley Settlement House, which was founded in North Minneapolis in 1924 during the Renaissance by social worker Gertrude Brown. The settlement house was a sanctuary for Black migrants in a divided America. I'll pause to say my parents grew up going to Phyllis Wheatley as a community center. I saw concerts at Phyllis. I saw a Michael Jackson impersonator at the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center as a kid. The settlement house, though, before it, which Raymond O. Hatcher led after Gertrude Brown, that would be, it would provide shelter, arts and entertainment, sports, and healthcare services for local Black folk. This settlement house that would be named for the first Black poet to publish in what would become America, so that we would remember her in Minnesota. But this example of leadership, that is that I've described, beginning with the image of the memorial concert and the coalition of forces that brought it to us at a time when the Givens Collection also came to this coalition politics and politicking. This example of leadership, community care, and cultural pride, constrained by de rigueur segregation, is an episode in a longer history of Black cultural leadership in Minnesota. In a 2018 article for Minnesota History Magazine titled "The Perils of Peace, Frederick Douglass, Winona, and the Civil Rights in Minnesota After the Civil War," Wayne Ganaway writes, "Black Minnesotans made their opinion on suffrage known in 1865 when the members of the Golden Key Club, a literary association for African American men in St. Paul, delivered a petition to the legislature demanding voting rights. And making their case, club members cited the taxes they paid, their belief in American civilization, industry, intelligence, sobriety, and religion, and their service in and hallowed memories of the Civil War." That was their appeal. Pardon the quality of the image, which I borrowed from our cohorts over at the Gale Library at Minnesota Historical Society. But it includes a clipping from the St. Paul Press from January 8th, 1865, which reads, "Under the auspices of the Golden Key Club, a literary association of colored young men in the city of St. Paul, and a large concourse of our people, this is a Black newspaper, of our people convened in the Colored Black Baptist Church on the evening of January 1st for the purpose of observing in a becoming manner the second anniversary of the issuance of the Proclamation of Emancipation by President Lincoln." So they were celebrating the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Other headlines highlighting Golden Key Club activities are as follows. This is from the Appeal, the Western Appeal as it began. Remember, this used to be called the Northwest, right? The Northwestern Appeal, the Western Appeal, eventually the Appeal, from 1899. "Doings in and about the great flower city." This is in Minneapolis, they're not in St. Paul, right? "Grand ball and cakewalk given by the West Hotel Golden Key Club at Labor Temple Hall," which was early on, the Labor Temple Hall would greet Black gatherers in an otherwise Jim Crow setting. This is from St. Paul Recorder from 1941. So we began in 1865 with evidence of the Golden Key Club. Now we're in the 40s during the Second World War. "The Golden Key Club met Saturday, February 2nd at the home of Miss Benjamin Taylor, 687 Rondo Avenue." In hindsight, we might call this the cultural politics of Black love in Minnesota. All this activity. It has been required of people in America going back to the 19th century, where in order to succeed at lifting up the race, Black people unite, often in tandem with other cultural communities. Black people love freedom because we love ourselves. Still, the archive bears witness to the experiences of humiliation, violence, and other injustices that have caused many to consider various degrees of separation. Toni Morrison's beloved, published in 1987, is banned currently in several school districts in America. As of this past Tuesday, this week, the newspaper clipping you see on the right was still available among the digital holdings at the Library of Congress. It's from the February 2nd, 1856 issue of the Anti-Slavery Bugle, which I'm using here courtesy of the Project Ohio Memory. And it relates the historical incident that is fictionalized in Morrison's novel about a community haunting and the world's inside and outside of the circle of family and nation, where an enslaved woman took her children as her own property in ways that would horrify her masters and come back to haunt and help heal her community. In this novel, the title is of the novel, Beloved. Well, Beloved is a baby ghost in Morrison's Gothic novel from the 80s. Like much of Morrison's work, though, including another banned book, The Bluest Eye, white Americans are hardly visible. Her books tend to focus on the effort to, under extreme conditions, forge and keep love of self and between Black men and women in particular. Romantic love is also at the center of Morrison's novel on the trauma of slavery, Beloved. Speaking of one of her predecessors, Richard Wright, in an essay called Alas, Poor Richard, James Baldwin wrote that in most of the Negro novels written today, he's talking in 1960, there is a great space where sex ought to be. And what usually fills that space is violence. I take Baldwin to mean that sex is an expression of love, like violence is an expression of hate. And he also knew that people can take violence for love. Shown here are two paperback reprints of novels by James Baldwin. Giovanni's Room from 1959, the story of a love affair between two men, an American and an Italian, in Paris, and If Beale Street Could Talk from 74, a Black man and woman's romance under the pressures of racism in America. Baldwin's secular love, the love that you find expressed in novels of this sort, was the love of Eros, sensual and passionate. Whereas, to go back to the beginning, in Dr. King, his was the love of agape, right? Selfless and unconditional. And in the 1960s, the two men, King and Baldwin, would garner a lot of attention for their respective credos. But we also know that in the 1960s, racial tensions would give way to violence. Many writers, like Toni Morrison, would, with great purpose, turn inward to consider Black love. This would be a common feature of the Black arts movement of the 60s and 70s, evidenced here in Elizabeth Catlett's Mother and Son from 1971, and Black is Beautiful from 1972, lithographs from a folio that we have in the collection, which was published in 1972. Also consider this poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, published in August 1981, same year of Dr. King's reprint, in an issue of Ebony magazine out of Chicago, a publication of the Chicago-based post-World War II new Black media mogul and cultural leader, John Johnson. Black love. Black love provide the adequate electric for what is lapsed and lenient in us now. Rouse us from blur, call us. Call adequately the postponed corner brother, and call our man in the pinstripe suiting and restore him to his abler logic, to his people. Call to the shattered sister and repair her in her difficult hour, narrow her fever. Call to the elders, our customary grace and further son, loved in the long ago, loathed in the lately, a luxury of languish and of rust. Appraise, assess our world and the workers in the wild, lest they descend to malformation and undertow. Black love, defined and escort our romantic young by means and redemption, discipline. Nourish our children, proud, strong, like men, upright, easy, quick, flexed, little, stern, warm, history women. I see them in Ghana, Kenya, in the city of Dar es Salaam, in Kalamazoo, Mound Bayou in Chicago. Lovely, loving children with long, soft eyes. Black love. Prepare us all for interruptions, assaults, unwanted pauses, furnish for leavings and for losses. Just come out blackly glowing. On the ledges and the lattices, against the failing light of candles that stutter, and in the chop and challenge of our apprehension, be the always wonderful of this world. After 1968, the year that Dr. King was assassinated, Brooks published exclusively with Black publishers. What you see here on the left, the second edition of Blacks, was published in her hometown of Chicago by the David Company, owned by Brooks and named for her father. The collection includes poems that were published prior to the widespread acceptance of the category Black. And it bears an inscription by Brooks to the Givens collection, dated 2 years after the collection's founding at the University of Minnesota while she was visiting. But is it separate? Are the efforts like those of the Golden Key Club, the early 20th century New Negro Renaissance, the Black Arts movement of the 60s and 70s, African American studies, or the Givens collection separate? Do those efforts divide us? Pictured here are Prejudice and Your Child from 1955, or is Prejudice and Your Child from 1955, written by the psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark, who were a couple, like Ozzy and Ruby. This book features research that concludes that segregation by race has led to inequality in education and desperately low self-esteem in Black youth. The research helped influence the 1954 decision in Brown versus the Board of Education. You all might remember the Dowell test, some of you. The Brown versus Board of Education, of course, which would desegregate America's public schools based on, right, many of the conclusions drawn in Prejudice and Your Child. Next to it, though, we have the curriculum guide, a curriculum guide published in 1988 as part of the work of the Givens Collections Advisory Board and Patrons Council led by Ezell Jones. The guide represents efforts toward multicultural education, right? The efforts toward multicultural education that emerge in the wake of Brown versus the Board, Brown v. Board. And in some of the same conscious struggle, and it is of, pardon me, the same conscious struggle that led to the founding of the African American Studies Department. Interestingly, the Clarks were both the same generation of Archie Givens Sr. As children, they would all have been cared for by the generation that included poets like Langston Hughes, whose grandparents had been enslaved. Which is to say, the guide continues the tradition, the curriculum guide, continues the tradition of Black love that has fueled the freedom struggle. Black love so that Black children and students might develop a healthy and more accurate sense of themselves. See poet Nikki Giovanni's Hip Hop Speaks to Children from 2008, a collection of hip hop lyrics, poetry, and audio samples, which means to reflect back to a misunderstood youth its own brilliance and connection to a rich ancestral past. Black Love Day, Kwanzaa, supplements to Valentine's Day and Christmas. Difference within sameness, so that Americans might better know themselves, so that, as a matter of the heart, we might all get free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Davu, for those wonderful talks. So much to think about. We are, in fact, right at time, so I'm afraid that I'm going to have to invite you to come and ask your questions personally to Davu and Amanda. I want to remind you that if you're interested in a tour, connect with Davu. And while you're here, we would love it if you would look at our exhibits across the hallway over here. Making Room, Women's Histories from the Northwest Architectural Archives. Downstairs, right next to the Wallen Center, is Campus Kiosk, the voice of student groups at the U, which is from the University Archives. And right next to the gallery, Looking for Children in the Early Modern World, which is a poster exhibit in the Bell Room. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you for coming this year, and we'll see you again in the fall.